back to another Transforming Relationships Through Truth, through A Course in Miracles, with Anna and Greg, and Holy Spirit.
Yes. Beautiful. And let us see if we can find our monitoring here. Let's see. We want to monitor this on Facebook.
So we can see any of your comments as they might come through.
All right, and there we are. Let me turn down the volume. Okay. Wonderful. Okay.
Right. So we're back in Chapter 4, whether you're in the annotated purple edition or the blue book, which is, what is that called?
It's called the Foundation for Inner Peace version.
The Foundation for Inner
Peace.
Peace.
And it's the blue covered edition. So that's what I call it, the blue covered edition. And and we study out of the original dictation edition that has taken many different forms, and we like to study from the one that's the purple covered edition that Robert Perry put together, that has all the original dictation that came through Helen, plus a lot of other stuff about and from and through Helen and Bill. So that's the one that we like to teach through, and it's called the Complete and Annotated Edition of A Course in Miracles. It's annotated in that that Robert Perry makes a lot of clarifying notations in the footnotes, and also many notes from, to, and about Helen and Bill.
Hi Irene, good to see you tonight.
Hi Irene.
And
good to see you.
If you're in either book, we're in Chapter 4 in the annotated purple edition. It's going to be Section 6, and in the blue book it's going to be Section 4, and they're both titled This Need Not Be. Doesn't have to be this way, folks.
That's right, and I have titled this class ACIM's Emotional Rescue Plan, because is that a good title?
Yeah. It need not be this way. You need to be rescued. Because
it talks about all kinds of emotional dysfunctions like anxiety, depression, and sadness, and what it means when you experience these emotional states. Okay, these are moods. Talking about moods. So if you ever experience issues with moods, if anybody ever calls you moody, or tells you have a mood disorder, well, we all have a mood disorder periodically. And the Course in Miracles tells us that you can tell you can tell whether you have right or wrong perception or interpretation according to your moods, and using your moods to tell you when you have chosen wrongly or rightly is the one right use of judgment. And so Course in Miracles is something that is definitely not about spiritual bypass. And the Course in Miracles is asking you to look at your feelings, to use your feelings not as the authority of what's going on, but to use your feelings to let you know whether you're seeing things correctly or not. So it's not about bypassing your emotions just for thoughts. It's about using your feelings and your moods and your emotions as a barometer to let you know whether you're interpreting correctly. And we're starting at paragraph 5 today, and part 1 of this really goes through what to do when you realize when your mood has told you that you have chosen wrongly.
Right.
And it says that whenever you are in a bad mood, what has happened is that you have thought wrongly about someone that love has created.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's really going on.
That was enough to swallow last week.
Yeah, that was plenty.
Right there.
Exactly.
That whenever I'm feeling sad, anxious,
depressed,
angry, upset,
yep,
all of those emotions that we all deal
That
with.
we all experience.
know those emotions. But we think it's coming from, well, half the time we don't even know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
But when we do think we know where it's coming from, it's not from the source of where it's really coming from. Where it's really coming from, what we heard last week, was I have misjudged my brother or my sister, whom God has created. And tonight is going to even get deeper into that, you know, how we should be looking at each other and how we should be looking at ourselves.
Yeah. And then it gave us a handy dandy formula for how to change our mind. So it says use your mood to let you know if you are misinterpreting somebody that God or love has created. And then it says, it gives us this formula, and the formula was to ask yourself to think about what you have thought about this person that was unloving, and ask yourself, what have I thought about this person that most probably God would not have thought about this person, right? And what would God think about this person that I have not thought about this person? And then it says, now change your mind accordingly. Change your mind accordingly and your actions relative to this person. So it's a really amazing way to determine whether you're misinterpreting another person. It lets you know that you're upset because you're misinterpreting someone whom God and love created. And then it says what to do when you realize that you have thought wrongly about someone whom God has created. So it's extremely practical, useful formula in this section. And so now we're going to start at paragraph 5, where it's going to go through the list of bad moods. You know, sadness, depression, anxiety, guilt, all these what we call bad moods. Okay, we already heard in paragraph 1 through 4 how they came about. Okay, we're going to go more and then what to do to change your mind to think in accordance with how God thinks about this person that you've misperceived, and that's why you're in a bad mood. So now it's going to go more deeply through the different bad moods and what's really going on and what to remember to shift that bad mood into a positive mood. No spiritual bypassing. It's really looking at it and then remembering the truth of hearing the truth about it, and then choosing otherwise. Okay. All right. So it says, so we're in paragraph 5. When you are sad, no, this need not be. Why? Why does it not be? Because depression is of the ego, and you are hiding little spots of hatred that are hurting you. So interesting connection between depression and hidden spots of hatred that you are hiding. Right? So what happens when you hide your little spots of hatred? They hurt you. How do they hurt you? You get depression or you get sadness. Oh, so that's, of course, in Miracles says about where sadness and depression really comes from. You know, we think that I'm sad and depressed because somebody hurt me or somebody deprived me, somebody didn't treat me right. And he's like, no, actually, it's coming from the little spots of hatred that you are pretending that you don't have. I don't hate anybody. Then why are you so depressed and sad? So then it says, depression always arises ultimately from a sense of being deprived of something you want and do not have. So that's what we think that our depression is coming about. I'm being deprived of something that I want that I don't have. He says, so, but no, be certain that you are deprived of nothing except by your own decision, and then decide otherwise. Okay, so that's the first emotion or mood that it wants us to know about: sadness and depression. What it's coming from, what it seems to be, and what you need to remember so that you can decide otherwise.
And the only thing that we're deprived of, we're hearing here, is our own decision. I'm making the decision to think about my brother or sister the way God would, or to keep running on this old railroad track of the way that I would think of my brother and sister. So it's only my decision, and if it's the way I would think and not in alignment with the way their maker made them would think of them, then I'm going to be deprived of joy. I'm going to be deprived of happiness, of contentment. All of these are things coming from my decision.
That's right.
The decision I'm deciding to go with either God, love, or another path.
Right, we're choosing between, do I want to go with God's interpretation of this person, God who, by the way, created them, I didn't, or my interpretation of this person, which is unloving, aka hate, and is making me sad and depressed.
Right.
You know, those are our decision. That's our choice. And so sadness and depression is someone's depriving me, not me, someone else is depriving me of something that I want and I don't have. But the truth is that I'm sad and depressed because I'm depriving myself. And like you said, what am I depriving myself of? The correct perception of this brother or sister in my experience.
Right.
You know, I'm the one making me depressed and sad by my misinterpretations of someone that love has created. Okay, so that's the first bad mood that it wants us to hear the truth about.
And we know it's like quicksand, because when I get sad or I get depressed, who am I most likely to even ramp up, turn up the dial on misperceiving?
Whoever's closest to you.
Yeah, because I'm
whoever's
depressed.
around.
I'm depressed. So I want to blame somebody for why I'm not feeling good, you know? If I'm anxious, angry, upset, somebody's got to be responsible for it.
That's right.
Not me.
No.
And so
I wouldn't just choose to be depressed.
Quicksand. I got this way by judging my brother or sister wrongly.
Right.
And now that I'm depressed, I even more want to judge my brother and sister wrongly, because now I want to blame somebody.
Right.
And so now I'm just asking for another whole shipment of depression, anxiety, upset to come my way.
Yes.
Just to keep me, and that's what the ego wants, is to have us get into that quicksand.
Yep.
Sinking in it, judging each other, judging, and then you know how it is when you get down and out, you're grumpy, you're judging more than ever. So now the quicksand is hardening around you. You know, it's got you.
Exactly, and you will feel stuck.
But at least before, the old way, we didn't even know
why we were stuck. And how we got
just
there.
assumed it was because of Uncle Billy Bob, what he said or did.
Yeah.
Rather than going, oh, it's because I've been judging my brothers and sisters in error.
Yep.
Oh, that's why I'm here. And then it's going to be a lot less, once you realize where the root of the problem is, isn't it easier now not to want to go that way? To not be judging so much, not be condemning so much, not by projecting so much out onto others. Because we got to get, you know, out of this muck that we got ourselves into. That's how we got in.
That's right.
So obviously to get out, we have to stop doing that.
That's exactly right. And this section is telling us exactly what to do. Exactly what to do to decide otherwise and to get ourselves out of the quicksand.
Yeah.
You know, as soon as you tell yourself, I am deprived of nothing except by my own decision, and I want to decide otherwise, I don't know the truth about this person. This person is as God created them, and so what God would have thought about them was they're an innocent child of God, even if they're mistaken, and so am I, pop, you're out. You know, you tell yourself the truth about it, and you're out. The truth, like they say, know the truth, and the truth will set you free. You know, remember the truth about your bad mood, and it pops you out of the quicksand of that bad mood. So now for the next bad mood, okay?
All right.
All right. Yeah, check on the sadness and depression part, all right, and the blaming of everybody else for it. Check, 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 all right? Okay, and then it says, now when you are anxious, know that all anxiety comes from the capriciousness or the unpredictability of the ego, and remember that this need not be. I don't need to be anxious. I don't have to be anxious. Why? He says, because you can be as vigilant against your ego's dictates, which is anxiety, just as much as you can be vigilant for the ego's beliefs. Okay? So that's why we don't need to feel anxious, because anxiety comes from the unpredictability of the ego. I don't know what the ego is going to come up with next. No telling. The ego is always coming up with something, right? It's always something with the ego.
I was telling you that earlier today.
It's always something with the ego. The ego's constant drama, constant fear, constant conflict, constant upset. It's just never ending with the ego. You know, it's like, it's always something with the ego and in the ego world. Why? Because the ego lives off of conflict. The ego lives off of fear and drama. So for the ego to live, it has to keep the fear and the conflict and the hate and the drama going. And so anxiety is like, well, I don't know what it's going to come up with next. I don't know if I'll be prepared. You know, will I be able to handle it? You know, and so of course, if you're worried about what the ego is going to come up with next, you're going to be anxious. That's what anxiety means. But it's saying that we don't have to be anxious, because no matter what the ego comes up with, we have what it takes. Because we can be as vigilant against the ego's beliefs or the ego's agendas as we can be vigilant for the ego's beliefs and agenda. So whatever the ego comes up with, even unto death, you know, we have the truth within us that we can be vigilant for, and it will protect us and pop us out of the conflict. And that's why we don't need to be anxious about what the ego is going to bring up next. And it's always going to be bringing up something.
Always.
As long as you have an ego, as long as you're here, where 99.99% of everybody here has an ego, then it's always going to be ego shit coming down.
We were reading and studying last night with some other mighty companions in chapter 31. It was so refreshing to hear. The truth of the matter is, the world, the realm that we're in this limited world with what we think were bodies, and this world was made, everything here was made for
problems, conflict.
And what the Course was really telling us in chapter 31 was, so don't, just be aware of that. Don't be surprised. Today we have our generator running outside and our freezer out in the garage, which is full from top to bottom of food, like most people have in the freezer for those to have provisions set aside. Well, they're not going to be set aside when the electricity goes out. And so what's the deal? Well, it's another day of the week, and it's another time, whether it's earthquakes or like we had windstorms that the wind
we
sounded
had hurricane force winds last night.
Yeah, the winds sound like that they were human yelling weird things outside of our windows last night in our bedroom. The whole house was just ready to...
Hurricane force winds.
Yeah, just amazing. But you wake up and the next day has, you know, you're falling down trees, the power's been shut off, not just in our little area, all over the city. It's incredible.
Several counties.
But the Course tells us Don't be surprised. That's what the world was literally made for.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't made for something else. It was made to bring you problems.
Mm-hmm.
And when you become aware of that, and that's what the course is all about, is lifting our awareness, lifting our consciousness, waking up from bed and stretching and looking around and being aware.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we were looking at earlier in this section. Be aware of your feelings. How do I feel? Oh, okay, I'm anxious.
Oh, I'm depressed or sad.
Okay, well then that means what? I'm listening to my ego.
Mm-hmm.
How do I know that? Because I have all the symptoms. Of what happens when I listen to my ego.
Mm-hmm.
When I listen to my ego, I judge my brother.
Oh yeah.
I judge my
because that's
I
all it
condemn
wants you
my
to do.
sister. Because they're not living up to my script now.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few days later, I'm depressed. I'm lethargic. I don't have any energy. I don't have any motivation to get anything done. I wish I could just take a nap.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could just, not have to deal with all this. Those are all, again, the attributes, the measuring rod or stick, what you said earlier, of my condition, current condition that I'm in. And I can be my own physician and go, ooh, I just look at the symptoms and okay, I've been listening to my ego. I've been judging my brothers and sisters wrongly. I've been thinking about them not with the same thoughts that their maker would think, but my own. And now look, it's got me in trouble. Why? Because as the Course tells us, we're too good at mind wandering. We just let our minds wander and judge people randomly. We don't even think about it.
We just let our ego take our minds away.
We're just so natural at it. Oh, look at that idiot. Look at that clown. Can't believe what they just said. What a dummy. Just constantly seeing them, not asking the question, do you think they're a dummy, Lord? You think they're an idiot? Did you make an idiot, God? Is that your idiot that you made?
I love that title of that show on Netflix called God's Favorite Idiot.
Oh yeah.
It was such a great series.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
And that guy.
God's favorite idiot.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, everybody thought he was an idiot.
Yeah.
But God didn't think he was an idiot. Not at all. God really liked him.
Right.
And everybody had got that guy wrong, because they weren't asking God's opinion. And our mood will always let us know whether we are asking God for God's opinion of this person that God created, or just making it up ourselves as if we are God, as if we created that person and know their truth. But that is what we're suffering from, according to A Course in Miracles, that what we're suffering from is we are trying to kick God off the throne and sit on God's throne and judge God's creations as if we are God. And the Course says, you can't. That's why you're suffering. That's where your suffering comes from. Because if that's what you're doing to God's creations, you can't help but think and assume rightly that God's judging you like that. And so, of course, you're going to be sad, depressed, anxious, guilty, ashamed, you name it. Because you're assuming that God and others are judging you the way you're judging them. And you're going to be worried and concerned and anxious and sad and depressed. So, so when you're anxious, you just remember that you're feeling anxious because you are afraid of the unpredictability of your ego. And just remember that whatever the ego comes up with, and it's always going to be coming up with something because that's what the ego does, and we're in the ego world. Then just remember that whatever the ego comes up with, I have the truth within me. I have spirit within me that can tell me the loving truth of them and me, and that will protect me and pop me out of the bad mood or the conflict that has come from my judgment. So, okay. So check on the anxiety. All right. So the next bad mood or emotion that you may feel that is indicative of what you've decided is when you feel guilty. Know that you're feeling guilty because your ego has indeed violated the laws of love. That's what the ego does. But you have not. So I'm feeling guilty. Oh, my ego must have violated the laws of love or the laws of God, same thing. And, by judging someone that God created that I didn't create. But remember that you did not violate the laws of love. Yes, your ego violated the laws of love because your ego is a violation of the law of love. But that you haven't violated the laws of love, which really means that you are not your ego. So you don't need to feel guilty about what your ego is doing because that's what your ego does. That's not you. You're not your ego. So you don't need to feel guilty about what the ego is doing. You just need to recognize why you feel guilty. I feel guilty because my ego has violated the laws of love, the laws of God. And you can't do that. You can't be unloving to one of God's creations and not feel guilty. That doesn't occur. So then it says, so now whatever it is your ego has done in violation of the laws of love that you are feeling guilty about, it says now I want you to leave the sins of your ego to me, says our teacher.
In other words, leave what you think the other person is doing wrong.
Right.
That's the ego sins. That's not what they're doing wrong. That's what is making me want to judge my brother or sister, not as the way God would judge them.
Right.
And so leave it alone. Leave it to
your teacher.
It to who's supposed to be judging them. Our higher loving self.
Yes, that's right.
The voice for God.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. Isn't that who I would want, judging me? Is I don't want you judging me. Heck no. I want God judging. I think I get a better deal if somebody that really knows what's going on judges me.
And if there's somebody who's judging me, I would much prefer that they take their judgment of me to their higher loving self. The voice for God within them. I would much rather that
for sure.
Than that they judge me.
How fortunate you would be that they would do that.
Oh, if only. And the Course in Miracles says, if you want other people to take your mistakes and give them to Spirit, then that's what you got to do with everybody else's mistakes. I want everybody else to take my mistakes and give them to the voice for God in them. I want them to do that with my mistakes, but am I doing that with their mistakes? And so if you want them to do that for you, then that's what you got to do for them. When you see their mistakes of their ego, instead of going, oh my God, I can't, what a jerk, oh my God, then what we're supposed to do is give their mistakes. Spirit, I offer you their mistakes. I'm not the one who created them, and I'm not the one who corrects their mistakes. So I am referring their mistake to you, voice for God within me, voice for love within me.
And listen up, here's the coolest thing about this literature, is it's telling us right there, it told us what the problem is. It pointed out the problem. You're sad, you're depressed, you're anxious, you're showing all these different symptoms. Okay, it came from judging your brothers and sisters wrongly. Now leave their sins up to me. Leave this sin up to me.
Yeah.
And so it just gave us the problem, as it always does. It didn't, notice it never said, like in this sentence here, it didn't say when you feel guilty, know that you probably have indeed violated the laws of God through your ego. It has not in any of these sections talked like that. It always directly tells us what the problem is.
Your ego.
Know this. Know that your ego, not you, know that your ego has violated the laws of God.
Yes.
But you have not.
And I think that's such an important clarification, or in such an important part, because it's reminding us that we are not our egos. And
Right.
if it was my ego that did it but not me, then I don't need to feel guilty. You know what I mean? If I'm not my ego, then I'll be like, oh, my ego is so crazy. But I don't need to feel guilty or ashamed about it because I'm not my ego.
Right.
And neither are they. You know, they have an ego too that's not really them. You know, and so it's a reminder that I don't need to feel guilty about what my ego does, which is always violating the laws of love. Every time you judge another, you're violating the laws of love. You're violating the laws of God. But that you don't need to feel guilty because that's just your ego doing that, and you're not your ego.
And
It's really powerful.
we've been convinced that it's like brainwashed, that we are our ego.
Yeah.
Our ego, that belief system, has us believing that we are it, that
Yes.
we are that. And we really believe that.
Absolutely.
And so that's part of the healing, is when we get healed back to our natural state of mind, our whole mind, we're going to realize that that was a bunch of nonsense. That could never be me. That could have never been me, and it will never be me.
Right.
It's just like a little leech that got on me,
That's right.
sucking the blood off. And
That's exactly right.
Having
That
to
we've been
pour off.
identifying with. You know, it's like having a leech
Yeah,
on you
no.
that's sucking your blood, and then you call it Greg.
yeah,
You know, you call it you. It's not you. It's a leech that's literally sucking your life force out of you.
and people go, "What is that? What, my arm or that extension of my arm?"
Right.
No,
They
that's
go,
not an extension of your arm. What is
That's a
that
leech.
on your arm?
like, no, that's me.
That's me. That's part
No,
of me.
no, that's
no,
not.
that's not. Get that
And-
off. What is that?
And just it's a great analogy, you know, the leech that's sucking your blood, your life force out of you, you know, you wouldn't need to feel guilty about what it's doing. You would be like, oh, I feel so guilty about how it's sucking my blood and the life force out of me. You'd just be like, get that thing off of me. You know, you wouldn't be like, oh, I'm a leech. No, you'd be like,
Right.
get the leech off of me. That's not me. Get it off of me. And so it's a very important part because only by realizing and remembering that you are not your ego can you not feel guilty about what it's up to. And it's always up to something unloving. That's what the ego is. It is literally an unloving thought. You know, the ego doesn't have loving thoughts. It doesn't do loving things. The ego
Right.
is a parasite, pure and simple. You know, parasites have one mission and one mission only, and that's to suck the life force out of you, to leach your life force energy or your blood out of you. And so, you know, and the ego is just like that. It pretends to be loving, it pretends to be your friend, but that's a big old mask deception. So we, you know, it's a big part of this curriculum is learning that, oh, I have an ego, but I'm not my ego.
Right.
And so I don't need to feel guilty about its crazy, mean agendas. That is what it is. I just need to go, ooh, that's my ego. I'm not that. I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I just want to give it to God. So I'll give that ego to God. Ego leech, I give you to God. And that's how, of course, of Miracles is teaching us how to correct our ego by first not identifying with it and definitely not feeling guilty about what the ego's up to.
Yeah. Yeah, your ego has indeed violated the laws of God, but you have not. This is where, in this section, now it's going to take us down a different pathway. Because as soon as we got to this, when Anna and I were reading this, I was like, it just sounds like I'm living in denial.
Like spiritual bypassing.
Like I said that bad, cruel thing to that brother, and now I'm supposed to just look at it as, well, my ego violated them and God.
But I didn't.
I didn't.
But then you're supposed to give it to God.
But the Course, it says it in different ways. That's why one of the most common things we keep hearing throughout the Course is, you are just as God created you. Because it has to keep telling us, you're not who you think you are. Do you realize that?
No.
You and I are not who we think we are.
Thank God.
The prodigal child, when the prodigal child had wandered away so far from their parent, they thought they were somebody that they weren't. They had part of them, their leech on them, was telling them, you're not even worthy to be called their child anymore. You could but at best be one of their hired hand servants, but at least they're eating better than this pig slop. But they have a total misperception of who they are. And you and I are in that place, and that's why we need healing. We need healing to realize I'm not this ego person that I'm always contending with, always fighting with, always trying to overcome. Why would I try to overcome something that I'm not even that? Just let it go. And how do I let it go? Give all the sins, all that I want to judge and condemn, over to my higher loving self. That's okay. That it doesn't say you shouldn't have them.
Right.
I do have them. That's why I need to give them.
Yeah.
That's the only way I can give them to Spirit, is because I do have them. I have those bad judgments. I have those misperceptions, those shortcomings of my brothers and sisters. I do have them. I'm not in denial about that.
At the moment.
But it's not mine.
Right. That's right.
So I shouldn't keep it. It belongs to the ego. It's like, ugh. All right, there you go.
And it says, leave the sins of your ego to me.
Right.
You know, so in other words, you know, it's like, oh, this is my ego, it's not me, and here you go. Here you go, love. That's not me. I don't feel guilty about it, but sure as hell I'm not gonna keep it and keep identifying with it. I'm gonna give that to you, love. And so that's what we're supposed to, he says, and that, what we just talked about, that process is exactly what this curriculum is for. Is that's not my ego. I mean, that's not me. That's my ego. I'm not gonna feel guilty about it, but I sure as heck I'm gonna hand it over to love. Love knows what to do with it, and that is exactly what the plan of healing is for. That's what A Course in Miracles is for.
And when you start learning that your bad reactions, behaviors, attitudes that you're projecting out onto others is not you, it's your ego. When you really start opening your heart to be willing to just accept it, you don't have to understand how that can be true. Well, I'm the one that did that or said that. Just start accepting that idea. You'll stop judging your brothers and sisters a lot quicker because you'll realize, oh, that's not their ego either.
That's not them, that's their ego.
That's their ego that they haven't given over to Holy Spirit. And they're still holding on to that identification.
Yes.
And so it's a two-way street. I see it in myself and I can see it in others. And when I see it in others, that's their ego, it would naturally be a lot easier to let go of the judgment of them. Because I can see, oh, they are just as God still created them too. They're still not that fear venting out into the world.
Exactly.
Like I do.
And that's what
and
I want.
I'm not that either.
And that's what I want other people to do when they see my ego.
Right.
You know, when other people see my ego, I want them to go, oh, that's not Anna.
Right.
That's not Anna. That's just her ego, you know, and I give her and her ego back to God, you know, and so that's what I'm going to have to do with others if I want others to give up, you know, to not associate me with my ego. I don't want people to be like, oh God, yikes, you know how she is, you know. I want people to go, well, that's just Anna's ego. That's not her, and let's just give her ego to love. Give it to love. And that's it. That's how I want other people to handle my ego when they see it. So that means that's what I have to do. And it says, and so leaving people's egos to Spirit, leaving your ego to Spirit, leaving their mistakes and their ego to Spirit, that is what this healing plan is for. Okay? The healing plan that A Course in Miracles represents, that's what it's for. Okay? He says, why? Because until you change your mind about those your ego has hurt, then this healing plan cannot release you. I got to change my mind about those whom my ego has hurt.
Yeah,
because
and maybe that's what it was talking
yes.
about, is that change my mind and that they're not their egos.
Exactly. That's changing our minds about whom our ego has hurt. Like, the ego, that's all it does. You know, my ego is not loving anybody.
It can't.
It can't, or else it wouldn't be an ego. The ego is literally an unloving thought. And the ego, so all the ego has is unloving thoughts. It doesn't matter if it's like, oh, you're beloved, or you're a child, or God, or whatever. The ego only has unloving thoughts, which means the ego's only trying to hurt everyone. You know, now it may say, oh, I'm trying to protect you. That's its cover, but that's just a cover. The ego's purpose is never loving. The ego is an unloving thought, literally, and that's all it is. And so, you know, if you are identifying with your ego, then you are going to be believing that you hurt them and them, everyone around you. You're going to believe that you have hurt everyone
and
that you're in a relationship with.
And you're just a horrible friend.
And you're a bad person.
Yeah.
And you're going to feel guilty.
And the ego's sitting there going,
yeah, all right.
yeah,
I get to live another day.
Child of God believes that they are this horrible, worthless person. Look at them now, depressing.
Look how guilty they're feeling because they hurt somebody.
Yeah,
you
because
know?
they thought they were me.
Exactly. And the ego's like, yeah, I get to live another day. All right. So that's why it says you've got to change your mind about those whom your ego has hurt. So in other words, I've got to go, yeah, my ego hurt them, but I did not. And I need to give that hurting intention, the ego, to God. Here, God. Here's my evil intentioned ego. There you go, God. You know what to do with it.
And doesn't it feel like we're giving God our mess? You know, instead of it's the ego's mess. It's hard to look at the truth.
I know.
It's not even my mess. I still want to lay claim to it as I'm giving it to God. I'm so sorry, and I said that, God, I did. I should know better. I've been doing a course all this time.
I'm a course teacher. Oh,
geez,
I feel so guilty.
I'm always telling myself the next time a situation presents itself. And in our relationships, like at home with each other and at the workplace and in our neighborhoods, where better are we going to be tried with this whole formula more often? Where are we going to be tried? But in our relationships, I'm going to constantly, you know, either be having Anna's ego come at me and be tested. Are you going to give what's not her, this leech? You're going to give it to God, hand those sins to your higher loving self, or you going to deal with it? And if I deal with it, what am I going to do? Okay, you giving me some unloving thoughts?
I'm going to give, now my ego's going to give you some unloving thoughts.
And so now I'm going to give her back some unloving thoughts. That's my way of fixing it.
Which is going to make you feel more
guilty.
There you go. Which means, and the ego's
it's going to feed her ego. It will bring food to the dinner table.
That's right, for the ego.
Like, oh, you made some rice and beans. Well, let me make up some chicken. Let's have a full meal.
A feast for the ego.
Yeah, let's not just have a little, snack. And we can have a whole smorgasbord between the two of us.
Of
hey,
guilt.
look, there comes Bobby. We can really have a whole banquet now. Got a few things to say to him. And we don't want to feed it. And that's what we do.
Exactly. Guilt is how you feed the ego. You know, we don't like how the ego makes us feel, but then we feed it with anger and guilt and projection. And, you know.
It's like we give it its Popeye spinach.
Exactly. Guilt is Popeye spinach for the ego.
Right.
And so they're saying that the goal here, the healing plan here, and the purpose of this curriculum is to stop associating yourself and them with the ego. Realize that, yeah, their ego and your ego has violated the laws of love. It's been unloving, but you have not. So don't feed it with guilty. Disassociate it, from yourself. It's not you. And then don't feed it with guilt.
Right.
Remember the truth about yourself, and then that leech, that parasite called the ego, and all the unloving things the ego does to others, and give it to love, who knows exactly what to do with it.
And equally, whether it's you or them, it doesn't matter.
Equally.
You could be the one that's the perceived idiot, and you know it.
Yeah,
you know what you said in that outburst.
Yeah.
That stupid behavior thing you did, like I did to my mom once. I was just flipping dollars at her. Here's your money, Ma. Don't you ever tell me what to do. Like my mom was
She's laughing now.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, that was so funny, Greg.
And
that was a great one, Greg. I knew that wasn't you.
When I was doing it back then, I could tell she was trying not to laugh. Just sitting in her office chair in her big leather recliner looking back at me, never saying a word.
Good old
Aries. She's probably smart enough to know,
don't laugh, don't feed the beast.
Don't feed the beast.
Don't feed the beast. Don't feed the beast. She was very smart.
Yeah.
She was very wise.
But
exactly.
Yeah, if you're really doing like you said, I love it. We could just pick up this whole course and say, this is what the atonement is for. This is what we're trying to teach us in this whole course. Is when you have that issue, give it to Spirit.
Exactly.
When you're thinking lowly of yourself, give it to Spirit. Stop identifying with that belief system. Stop feeding it.
Yeah.
Stop giving into it.
Stop identifying with it and stop feeding it.
Right.
And
how do you do that? You give it to Spirit.
You give it to Spirit. You do what Spirit told you to do. Remember, that's not you. Remember, that's not them. Remember, it doesn't have to be this way. The way you're interpreting it isn't the only interpretation there is, And then give the ego with its malintent, with its hurtful intent to God. Who knows what to do with it? You don't. Right. You're the one who made it.
Right.
You're the one who made the ego. But God and Spirit and your higher loving mind knows what to do with the ego that you made. So stop identifying with it and feeding it. You need to immediately recognize what it is, who made it, don't identify with it, don't feel guilty, and hand it over to love.
The Holy Spirit's like the fireman of heaven. We're just adding fuel to the fire, making it bigger when we get involved. When we turn it over and we start identifying with their ego that they're not, or my ego that I'm not, and I just hand it over to Spirit, as soon as I'm in recognition of what's going on. How do I my recognition? I'm anxious, I'm angry, I'm upset.
Guilty.
I'm feeling lonely, I'm depressed.
I'm angry.
I have all of these, any of these attributes. I immediately should look at what's going on in my life right now, and I should be able to quickly find a brother or sister, somebody I'm in relationship with for
that's
sure.
Right. Somebody you're thinking about.
And in that relationship, I have judged them to be who they're not, not as God created them, as their ego. And I've identified with that, and now I'm hooked, and now I've taken the poison.
Yeah.
But as quickly as I took the poison, I can do the antidote, which is handing it off to Spirit, saying, here you go. And that's what this curriculum is for.
That's
exactly
right.
That's what this is for. It's not complicated. It's really just stepping out of the way and letting truth prevail, letting truth come in.
Amen to that. And what all that we're talking about is what it says when it means you can be as vigilant for truth as you can be vigilant for the ego. What we're talking about is this is something that you can do. You can be as vigilant for truth as you can be for the ego, and that's why you don't need to feel anxious about whatever the ego, whatever unloving plan the ego's gonna come up with.
Mm-hmm.
The ego, that's all the ego's about, and that's all it's gonna be doing. And so you need to be surprised, you know, that the ego's come up with some other unloving thought.
It's
you
gonna
know?
happen.
Yeah, that's what the ego's about. And as long as you got an ego,
Yeah.
that's what it's gonna be up to. But the truth is that whatever the ego comes up with, that you have the truth within you that literally can make it disappear with a thought, with one thought of truth.
Yeah,
That's how powerful.
Just being a conveyor belt.
Yeah, just exactly.
Here you go.
Exactly. There's one line in the course where it says your one responsibility as a teacher and a healer is to refer all problems to spirit. Just like, oh, that's not you, you're not your problem, and I am now referring your problem back to God.
And an easy conveyor belt giving is just saying to Holy Spirit, because I do it all the time, is how do you see this?
Mm-hmm.
And just right there, I gave it to Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see this?
Yeah.
Because I'm looking, I don't have to explain anything else from there, because I already know how I see it.
And that's why you're upset.
Yeah.
You know. So it says, as long as you feel guilty, your ego is in command. Ooh, do you want the ego to be in command of you? No. It says, as long as you feel guilty, your ego is in command. Why? Because only the ego can experience guilt. And your guilt need not be. You feeling guilty, you allowing the ego to be in command of your mind need not be. I'm so glad to hear that. I don't want the ego to be in command of my mind.
Right.
Ew. I don't want to be the ego's bitch, you know. And so, but as long as I feel guilty, ego is in command.
And again, the Course isn't saying you're probably letting your ego be in command if you're feeling any guilt.
Yeah.
It's not. It's so cutting right to the issues as they are. As long as you feel guilty, you know, whenever. So again, it's what we're saying in last week's class. It's a telltale sign on the game of this world. Oh, I see you, ego. Once you spot the ego, that's one thing I learned in the first year of A Course in Miracles is, I believe one of my big, for me, giant strides in A Course in Miracles was the ability to spot the ego, or you could say the devil, or whatever term you want to give it. But to be able to actually recognize it, because all of its fingerprints are all over this story or situation. Once you recognize it's there, it gets dispelled. It really does. It like, I don't know how it happened, but it just once it's discovered, it dissipates.
Exactly, because the ego, it lives in secrecy. It only can live in hiding, like we read last night. And so once you bring the ego and its purpose to light, it is no more, because the ego only lives in secrecy.
And when you see it, when you're like, ooh, boy, I see you don't want it to be in command. You know when you recognize it and you see it that it was in command up until that moment of your awareness that it was there. And now that your awareness is there, your conscience, you're awake of what's going on, and you have the remedy of how to solve it, I'm just going to hand you over to my higher level self.
It knows what to do with you.
See ya.
Bye. See ya. So glad to not be ya.
Yeah, and then guess what? And then guess what?
What?
And then guess what?
What?
The rewards, the natural inheritance that we deserve is now made manifest, because now what would be the opposite of what we were doing? We were doing that which brings the rewards, which are depression, anxiety, and all of those type of fruit. And now we're going to get the opposites. We're going to have our joy restored. Our happiness has come back home. The pursuit of not feeling anxious, of feeling content, of feeling taken care of,
Safe.
of feeling supported.
Yeah.
And that things are just going the way they should be, and you're just happy with the way life is. You're not pretending to be, you really are. Why? Because you're letting go of the identification of what's not true.
Exactly, and letting go of the identification with the unloving ego. You know, that's what we're doing. You know, everybody's ego is unloving. The ego doesn't love anybody.
You can't fix it.
Now, the ego pretends to like and love everybody, but it's a ruse.
Right.
But the ego doesn't love anybody. So if you identify with your ego, then you are going to feel very guilty, as if secretly you know you're an unloving person. You know, no, you are not an unloving person, but your ego is an unloving thought. And until you make that separation and remember you are not your ego, you are going to feel guilty about those whom your ego has hurt. And if you're going to feel guilty about those whom your ego has hurt, you're going to feel guilty about all your relationships, everybody, because your ego don't love anybody. That's the thing that, of course, in Miracles taught me, that nobody, I didn't hear anywhere else. It's like there's a part of our mind that doesn't love anybody. All it has is unloving, hurtful thoughts toward everybody. It doesn't make any exceptions. Oh, this is my perfect child. I don't have any hateful thoughts about them. No, the ego doesn't make any exceptions. The ego is an unloving thought. And so, you know, so we've got to remember that we are not our ego, so that we don't feel like a perpetually, chronically guilty person about our unloving thoughts that the ego has for everybody. So I love it. This is the only way to really undo that deep existential feeling of shame that everybody carries around, even though that who they are is a loving person.
Right.
But yet they've racked with existential guilt. You know, like, how does that happen? Like, I'm a nice person, but I'm racked with existential guilt. Yes, because you've identified with your ego, which is unloving and hurtful to others, and its intention is to hurt others. Yeah. And so it's a really important piece about how to heal us of that existential guilt and shame that we all carry, until we realize, oh, I need to change my mind about those whom my ego has hurt. I need to realize that that is not me. I'm not my ego. The hurtful part of me is not my ego. And I need to now give all those hurtful thoughts, or all that I feel guilty about, to Spirit. It's a really important point.
We've identified as somebody that can be fearful, that we have anything to fear, that we're vulnerable. Well, yet the truth is, God, Creator, our Maker, did not give us a spirit of fear. Meaning, that's not who we are. If God didn't give it to us, then that's not us.
That's not our true identity, right?
But again, the brainwashing came into our belief system since our birth.
Yes.
Since our birth. And this other personality attached through a belief system, through fear and all of its brothers and cousins. And we've identified that's who I am. I'm vulnerable like that. My brothers and sisters
I'm hurtful.
Are hurtful and vulnerable like that too.
We're
guilty. All this way. And when we realize, hey, we've all been tricked.
Yes.
It's not just Greg's been tricked, Greg's been brainwashed to believe he's this evil person and this good person. That breaks all the laws of the universe. Life only gives birth to life. Good only brings forth good from good.
That's right.
You can only get an apple from an apple tree. You can only get from the substance of what it came from.
That's right.
And so if you came from good, you're only good.
Meaning only loving.
Right. You didn't become good and then start reading some bad, and now we have this mixture of bad and good.
Duality.
As if bad and good can be in one component together.
Yes. Okay.
When they can't. They're
Yes.
opposites. They have nothing to do with each other. One is true,
And
the
one's not.
truth, and one is a lie.
Yeah.
It's fiction. It's not even real. And yet we give it all this power, all of this time, all of this attention to what's not even true or real. We think we're letting go of a part of us that never was us, nor will ever be us. And we want to understand it before we're willing to do it. Before I'm willing to let go of those guilty feelings of who I really am. I know what I did. I know what I said. Well, I know what you did. I know what you said, or how you behaved. Until I'm willing to let go of that, I'm not going to be healed. I'm just going to stay in this world, this dream world, powerless world, where I'm contending to be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, two different people in
Duality.
one embodiment.
Exactly.
When that is not the truth. It never was, nor will ever be the truth.
Hallelujah. It'll never be true that I'm a hurtful person and a loving person, both.
Right. But we think we are.
And that's what we've been taught, you know.
Yeah.
And that's another word for duality, like Matt was teaching this morning at the Miracle Center.
Yeah.
That's the duality where we believe that we're both loving and unloving, and we're taught that the unloving part is equally us, and that we should feel guilty and ashamed of it.
Right.
And so, you know, and so here we are, loving people who have a parasite within us called the ego that is unloving, that we are now feeling guilty about hurting others, when that was never us, and we never did that, but yet we're feeling the guilt and the shame over it.
Yeah. And this whole world is the ego world. This whole world is a world of opposites. Light, dark.
Yeah. Duality.
Up, down. Duality.
Bad, good.
Bad, good. And it's all in one. It's all in one world. When it couldn't be further from the truth. Heaven is a place of no duality. There's only good. There's no judgment in heaven. There's no, courthouse in heaven. There's no hospital in heaven. Why? Because there's no duality in heaven. There's only what God created and nothing more. We're in a world where we think there could be more than what God created, that there could be something else. And that belief system has brought us together in this experience. And God's like, that's cool, that's all right. But when you're tired of beating yourself up in the world of duality, if God thought that was a good idea, God would have had duality. But God didn't. We thought that would be a good idea to have duality, because it was the only way we could come up with the idea of what we call exaltation.
Specialness.
Where I can be a little more special, a little more loved, a little more recognized than if I was just equal with everybody. And so I'm going to need
like God created us to be.
I'm going to need a little duality here.
You're going to need a little duality so I can get a little bit more from me.
Yeah.
Instead of being one with everyone and God.
Right.
That's not good enough for that. That was the tiny mad idea that crossed our mind that we forgot to laugh at, that then became a serious idea, and then that's where the world came from, according to A Course in Miracles. All right.
All right.
Okay, beautiful.
Paragraph 8.
And so
I knew it would be good tonight. We were reading together before class, and there's just these times, at least it's good for me. I'm enjoying what we're reading. I'm really getting a lot out of it, because I'm seeing, as always, the great love our Maker has for us, because we have the ingredient right in black and white, right on a platter in front of us, handed over to Spirit. That split personality.
Right, exactly. Beautiful. And how about a little music for this?
Requested a little bit ago, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow.
Oh. And see, but you didn't even have to.
You're not interrupting it, so you're doing it just on time right now.
Exactly.
Look at you.
Ah, I love it. A little bit of awaken music. Then we got a binaural beat that's anxiety healer. Some night music and some bamboo fountain.
My beautiful baby.
And there you go. Aw. All right. So, let me turn this down a little bit. And yeah, now we're on paragraph 8.
All right.
Where it says, be honest. Honest about what? Be honest in trying to see whom your ego has hurt. You know, who is it that you're feeling guilty about your unloving thoughts to, or your unloving thoughts or actions to? Be honest about that. Who are, like you were telling me earlier before we started, you were having some guilty thoughts about somebody in your past. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you were, and then and you were being honest.
Yeah.
In trying to see whom it was that your ego has hurt.
Right.
And meaning be honest about where it is that you feel guilty, the relationships in which you feel guilty in. Those are relationships in which your ego has hurt or tried to hurt them with unloving thoughts for them. And it's asking us to be honest about that, because we have a tendency to not be honest about that. You know, we tend to be like, well, they blah, blah, and they blah, blah, instead of going, I feel a little guilty. I had a lot of unloving thoughts and actions for that person. You know, we're not honest about that.
Well,
we're more like, well, they deserved it, and they were blah, and they blah, blah, blah. They made me do that.
Or even if you feel bad for them, like you feel like they're vulnerable, they're in a bad place. In other words, are those uplifting feelings or thoughts? No.
No.
But if you're feeling that way, then your thought of them is what God made as vulnerable. And then you take a step back at the story and you remember what our work is here. This is what the course is all about. Is that how God looks at them? Is that they're really vulnerable like that? That they're really, you know, they need a lot of help.
And that's exactly what it's saying. It's saying be honest in trying to see whom your ego has hurt, and also be honest in trying to change your mind about them.
Right.
So, you know, like you were saying, you know, you had been feeling guilty about your unloving thoughts, about how your ego had been trying to hurt, but also be honest in trying to change your mind about them and not see them as someone who can be hurt by a misperception.
Right.
You know, that person cannot be hurt by your ego trying to hurt them. They can't be hurt. That's what it means to try to be honest about changing your mind about them whom you think your ego has hurt.
Right.
And you know, it's like, well, this is somebody God created, which means God would not create them so that they could be hurt or vulnerable by what my ego would try to do to them.
Right.
Oh yeah, right. That person, the way they were created by God, they're not vulnerable to what my ego or their ego tries to do to them.
Even if they
Wonderful.
Even if they agree with you.
Even if they also agree with you and go, you hurt me.
Yeah.
You know?
And tell you that.
That's right. It says, but be honest in trying to see whom your ego has hurt, and also be honest in trying to change your mind about them. They can't be hurt by me.
Yeah.
Who they really are can't be changed by whatever my ego tries to do to them.
Yeah. To be able to change your mind about them. My mind is telling me all kinds of stuff about them or me. And I have it makes all practical sense. It seems like it's got a lot of good evidence behind it. But I have to be also in trying. You know, that's a process.
Trying.
I'm trying to lift that weight. Did you lift it yet? No, but I'm trying.
Right.
What's the weight? To change my mind?
Yes.
trying to bench 140 pounds and I'm only used to doing 60. You know, I'm trying to lift this weight of my perception about this person.
I'm trying to change my mind about them. And I'm trying to change my mind to see that they were created by God, not me, and my ego cannot hurt them because they're created by God and not me. Mm-hmm. So whatever it is my ego thought about them, whatever my ego is trying to do to them to hurt them, hasn't happened. You know, they can't be changed by anything that anybody thinks about them. And then our teacher, the voice of the Course, says, I am not unmindful of your efforts in this direction. Well, thank you, teacher. It's like, our teacher is like, I get that you're trying to do that you're trying to be honest to see whom your ego has hurt, and that you're also honestly trying to change your mind about them, to see them as somebody who's not their body, who's not their ego, who can't be changed or hurt by the likes of your ego. And our teacher is saying, I'm not unmindful about your efforts in that regard. Thank you, teacher. Our teacher says, I'm not unmindful of your efforts in this direction. But our teacher is saying to us, you still have too much energy invested in your ego.
Yeah, that this person is limited, that I've hurt them.
They deserved it.
Any of those stories.
You know, exactly. They still invested in our story, which is they deserved it, they did it first, they made me do that, you know.
And that's why it was saying above this, trying to change your mind. Yeah. You have to open your mind to go, and that's in the process of giving it to Spirit. That's why I always say, how do you see it? That's me offering to change my mind about it. Yes. I already know how I see it.
Yeah, no problem.
I see them the way I see them. You know, and
the way your ego sees them.
Spirit, how do you see it? And let's see what happens. But I still have too much. Again, it doesn't say you probably have too much. It says, but you still have too much energy. Much too much. This is a counselor sitting down and just shooting it straight with us all the time. But we still have too much energy invested in the way we see them, which is our ego. That's right. The way we see them, not the way God that made them sees them.
And how do we know we still have too much invested in the way our ego sees them? Is because we still have the emotions and the feelings and the bad moods that are indicating that we are seeing them wrongly.
Thanks for bringing that back up.
No.
That's right.
And then
that'll tell you if you've given it to Spirit or not.
Absolutely. It says your feelings are your one right use of judgment. There's only one right use of judgment, and that's using your feelings to let you know if you are seeing this person the way their creator sees them, or if you're seeing them the way your ego is trying to hurt them. You know, it's like your ego, your God is always seeing them with love. Your ego is always trying to hurt them because that's all the ego ever does. And if you identify with your ego, then you are going to feel guilty about whom your ego has tried to hurt. And notice the word tried. You know, the ego can only try to hurt others. And then, but if you're identifying with your ego, you're going to feel guilty every time your ego tries to hurt another. And which means you're going to be feeling guilty all the time and in all of your relationships. Which is what the Course tells us, is that there's no one that whom you completely love yet, you know. And so that's why the purpose of this curriculum is to help us to understand that we are not our egos, and they're not their egos. Their egos only have malintent, and your ego only has malintent, and that's just the way it is. And they're not their ego, and you're not your ego. So you don't need to feel guilty about that when your ego tries to hurt others. And nor do you have to give them guilt when their ego is trying to hurt you. Because
that's what
they're not their ego.
That's what egos do.
That's what egos do. And we're in the ego world right now.
We're always trying to fix the ego.
Yeah, exactly.
Which we can't understand is not them. Well, they're the one that said it. Oh, really? Well, no. They, the true they, that you can't even see because you're distracted by the them that's not them. You can't see them. And because you can't see them, you can't see yourself. And because you can't see you or them, you can't see your maker. You can't see God. And so you can't have a real relationship with anybody because you can't have a relationship with that which you can't even see or recognize. You're just having a relationship with a blow-up doll. It's not even real. I didn't really say that.
I know. That was your ego. That wasn't Greg who said that.
No, that was.
And so I'm gonna give the blow-up doll comment to God.
Yeah. There you go. Have my blow-up doll.
There you go, God.
Can I get it back later?
You know what to do with that comment, God. I don't. All right. So remember, this need not be.
I'm just talking about real relationships.
I know. Of course, I know. And so it says.
I don't need a blow-up doll. Just to let you know.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me and everybody.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that thought. All right. So I think I'm blushing. Remember, this need not be.
All right.
I'm so glad you don't need a blow-up doll, honey. Thank you for sharing that with me and all the world.
I'm in need of that.
Woo, I think I need to roll up my sleeves. All right. So it says, he says, our teacher says, I am not unmindful of your good efforts in this direction, but you still have too much energy invested in your ego. And this need not be either. So, since this need not be that you have too much energy invested in your ego, what you could do instead is watch your mind for the temptations of the ego. What does that mean? That means don't be deceived by your ego, by the ego, your ego, their ego, the world's ego. Don't be deceived by it. That's the same thing as saying watch your mind for the temptations of the ego. And don't be deceived by the ego. Well, how do I do that? How do I watch my mind for the temptations of the ego? Know that your ego offers you nothing. So that's the instructions. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Like watching my mind for the temptation of the ego. And so how do I do that? Be aware of your moods. Be aware of your bad moods.
Right.
That's the first part
and know
of watching your mind.
And know where the source or where truly those bad moods are coming from.
And that's what it means to don't be deceived by your ego. It's like watch your mind for the temptation of the ego. That means pay attention to your moods, pay attention to your bad moods. And then like Greg said, when it says don't be deceived by it, know that the bad mood is not coming from anything outside of you. It's coming from your unloving thoughts and your identification with your ego. And then it says the third part is know that your ego offers you nothing. So know that the projection, the anger, the guilt, the anxiety, the depression, the fear, know that offers you nothing. And that's the instruction of how to stop investing too much energy in your ego. That's how you do it.
Which is to keep how we feel that our brothers and sisters are treating us, or to keep how we have treated others. That's not doing the work. That's not looking at the temptations. The temptations of the ego is for me to keep it, not for me to hand it off to Holy Spirit. That is the opposite of the ego's temptation. The temptation of the ego is like, look at that person, how they're acting. Can you believe what they just said to you? You need to respond to them. And then you do. You say some unloving thing back.
Mm-hmm.
And then later in the day, you're what? Feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
You feel a little depressed about what just happened.
A little anxious
Yeah.
about now what might be coming now.
Now what
What's going to happen now because I said that?
Now what are they going to say to my boss at work because I said that? You get
Or
anxious.
karma.
And instead of dealing with all of that, the temptation is to loop it in our head and to figure out ourselves what to do about it, how to fix it. And then I won't be depressed anymore if I fix it. And that's the temptation of the ego, is watch your mind for the temptations of the ego. And be not deceived to think that I can figure it out, I can fix it. No. I need to hand it off to my higher loving self and be done with it.
And know, which means be certain that it offers you nothing.
Yeah, it wants you to hold it. It wants you to own it. It wants you to figure it out, play with it for a while.
Fix it.
No, it offers you nothing. Hand it off like a hot potato.
Fast as you can. Fast as you can. Amen. Well, we probably should stop there.
We started pretty late.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
I think I would like to stop here.
Ann wants to stop. What do you guys think?
And because it's about to go into another very deep but beautiful.
Well, let's read this line here. There was one line that I thought we're not going to get to. That.
Yeah, there's lots of lines.
It's a prayer line.
Yeah.
Not that one.
Yeah, all at the end.
It's a long section.
Yeah, it's a very long section. So we'll pick up next week. It's really, this section is really chock full of beautiful, powerful formulas for how to not be deceived by your ego, and also how to pop up out of the quicksand that our ego is always trying to get us into in our relationship with each other and the world. So.
Well, Irene, I'm glad you asked that question. Yeah. So say something more about what the ego says is not who you are or what they are. So then what? I hand it off to my higher self. Then what?
Yeah. Then you have peace and joy.
Yeah.
Then you have peace and joy. Now you have the opposite of anxiety, the opposite of fear, the opposite of guilt, the opposite of depression, the opposite of sadness.
Yeah, before, the way we were doing it before, when I'm going to handle the problem, I'm literally planting seeds by keeping their identification of who they're not. I'm planting seeds of confusion, of depression, of anxiety, of upset, for me to experience. For me not to experience that is the results of me handing it off. Then what is, then I don't get the fruits of keeping that identification of them, who they're not, the identification of myself, who I'm not. I only get the results of those if I keep it. If I pass the buck, the buck doesn't stop here. It stops at my higher loving self. And by it going there, then I get paid off with good fruits.
Yes. Beautiful. Irene, great question. Thank you. And I want to say hi, Nita. Lovely to see your name there as well. So, thank you.
Love you guys. Thank you so much for joining in.
And thank you so much.
Anna's going to go around and do her thing because I don't know if I remember what to do.
Oh, yeah.
Want me to try it?
Yeah. It's so easy because this is Facebook. All you got to do is just hit the end button. So, and love you guys, and like and share, subscribe, and just know that this will be up on YouTube shortly. Love you all.